happening now. We want to welcome our viewers from across the United States, across Japan, and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good morning, good day, good evening. This is EdTech Situation Room, episode number 326. My name is Jason Neiffer, and I am joining you this morning, both actually live from Kyoto, Japan, where I've been vacationing with my lovely wife for the last week and a half or so in the beautiful, nerdy country of Japan. And joining me tonight, this morning for me, but joining me right now from Charlotte, North Carolina. Good morning, evening, Dr. Wes Fryer.
Hello, Jason. I am so excited that we were able to do this. And I tell you, the latency is negligible. It is just like you're sitting at home in Montana, which is also incredible since that's, I'm sure, 2,000 miles or about, not 2,000, but anyway, over 1,000 miles away. So I am a media literacy and STEM teacher, middle school teacher here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We are winding down the school year, and I'm looking forward to some different adventures this summer. Not going to be going across the ocean, but this is my first transoceanic webcast. We brought people in from Europe just years ago, but maybe we did some folks from Korea, but anyway, this is really cool. I don't think I've ever brought anybody in from Japan. So what is the best food? What's the best food you've had so far? Have you had some good food?
That's pretty interesting. I try to be adventurous when I travel just because, why bother, right? If you're just going to show up here and eat hamburgers, that doesn't seem very much fun. So we did have some octopus that we took a food tour in Tokyo, and it was wonderful. There was it was a group tour, but it was just my wife and I with a tour guide, and so she took us to a quieter neighborhood, Tokyo, and now I'm choking on my coffee. Tokyo, amazing, vibrant, very fast moving city, but we went to a quieter neighborhood and actually rode through a neighborhood on an older tram system, and there was 4 or 5 places that she had to stop to sample the wares, and one of them was I forgot the name of them and couldn't pronounce it appropriately anyways, but they were basically chopped up octopus that are fried into a dough ball and then have like a sauce covering it. And I'm not entirely sure, although I did have a very high-end sushi dinner the other night in Nowasawa Onsen, Japan, which is up in the mountains. It's kind of a ski town that is at the end of the season, but quite tasty. We've had actually a wonderful Indian food dinner that was just in our right next to our apartment in Tokyo. We've had a lot of steamed buns because we're into those, and both Japanese and Chinese style steamed buns were really good. And then last night we did what did we do last night? And now I'm not remembering because the food has been so great. But
That's good.
The dollar is so strong right now against the Japanese yen that everything is super dirt cheap. So a couple of times, Japan has a really big kind of convenience store culture here, and there's either what they call a Family Mart or a 7-Eleven, and Lawson is the name of another chain here. There's one of those like every 2 blocks. And that's, it's very common for people to grab lunch or breakfast there. And not unlike the bodega in New York City, same idea. But last night we just got to Kyoto yesterday. We took the bullet train here, 270 miles per hour, by the way, bullet train, which was super interesting. And of course, the public transportation system is insanely good. We're able to get anywhere. Google Maps works amazingly here to get you wherever you want to go. And the people of Japan are very welcoming to tourists. I know that in fact, I read on Reddit a lot that locals get a little tired of tourist season here, and I can totally understand why. The tourists can be obnoxious, and I'm sure I've been obnoxious once or twice in my time here, but everyone's just been super friendly. So I think we'll keep an eye on flights to Japan. I don't know if we can pull off the 1-week trip just because, the trip over here, was a 10-hour flight. We lost 13 hours or no, 15 hours in the flight. And although I adjusted to it pretty well, I'm still popping my eyes open about 4 a.m. every morning. So, so that might be if we get back and it's super rough to try to get back in the other side of the Earth's time zones, that might limit us. But it's been truly amazing.
It's supposed to be easier, I think, flying east, isn't it? Isn't
I
West
hope
supposed
so.
to be? Yeah. Well, you'll find out. You can
Yeah,
report.
yeah.
So,
I'll report you in 2 weeks from now what that looks like. So
well, I know from four trips to China that many things are eaten from the sea that may or may not be part of sort of the average American's diet. So, lots
yes,
of
yeah,
adventure to be had.
yeah. And
Well,
in fact, my first time eating salmon roe at the high end sushi place the other day, and that was super good. And yeah, I'm not supposed to eat raw fish because of my immunocompromised state, but my doctors have told me that if you go to a good, reputable sushi restaurant, so not in the interior of the United States, for example, where you don't know the provenance of the fish, then harder to do. But we've yeah, it's been truly life changing. So.
oh, that's so great. I'm so happy you all have made the trip. Well, what are we about to do in addition to, wishing that we were all going to, dine with you tonight in Kyoto?
Well, we've been scouring the internet to take a look at the news that's going on. There's a lot of interesting tech stories going on right now, many of which I think will have an impact on schools. I know that in Montana, it's levy season, which means that schools are asking communities for money for technology, money for building funds to extend budgets locally. In Montana, we have a lot of political issues going on right now, including a dramatic increase in property taxes. And so voters weren't in a really spending mood last night's election, from what I'm able to read. But we'll talk about technology today and maybe some insights that can help you and your colleagues, or if you have students in school systems, help you navigate these interesting waters we find ourselves in.
Okay. Well, our subtopics tonight under AI are biotech, politics, Hollywood and AI, education, tools, specifically Gemini Advanced, and then the complexity of AI training. We've got a tech correction, social media, TikTok ban related article, several things from the Apple event today, Google News, new media, media literacy, which is this is an incredible article, and then privacy, security, as well as our geeks of the week. So, as our transoceanic participant, I mean, we're both across the ocean from each other; it's all relative. But you're in the more unusual place. Where would you like to start tonight?
Well, let's go ahead and do a couple of the traditional tech topics. Let's start with Apple. Apple has some interesting things going on right now. I did not watch the release video yet, but this week Apple announced updates to the iPads. This is the longest time between updates, I think, since the iPad was first released in 2010. So those updates were welcome. You don't need to hear from us exactly what they released, but it's essentially 2 new iPad Pros and 2 new iPad Airs. So more of a consumer level device in the iPad Air and more of a kind of a prosumer device in the iPad Pro. I've read a lot of accounts from this saved the iPad to OMG, this is terrible, which is what happens with every Apple event. So, we'll know more 6 months from now when these devices actually get released. I will say that I was disappointed that Apple, in updating everything, meant that all the accessories needed to be updated as well. And I have found a lot of utility, and actually I was going to have it next to me here because I'm traveling with it. My tech travel bag this time around, and I spent a lot of time thinking about this stuff, maybe too much time thinking about this stuff if we're being super honest about the situation. But my tech travel bag this time was 3 devices. It's my MacBook Air M1, which is the consumer entry level Mac, which I've been carrying around for 2 years now, and it's a great device. An iPad Air 5 with the Apple keyboard, and then my iPhone is the 3 devices I'm carrying with me on this trip. And I have to say that I am using the MacBook more than I am the iPad. even though the iPad with keyboard is a pretty useful machine, and there's a lot of reasons behind that. But I did buy a used iPad keyboard when I bought my iPad Air 5. It's been really great. It's a good keyboard, and I got it for like $130 used, which I think those were like $250 when they first were released. Well, if I buy the new iPad Air 6, which is thinner and has a lot of advantages to it, including the M2 chip, I'd have to buy a new keyboard. More importantly, I have invested in the new generation of Apple Pen. I don't really use it that much, so if I did update, I think I would just buy the $9 Just Fine pen, third-party pen on Amazon, because that I don't need the 124 pressure point, yada yada yada. I don't use that stuff, and in fact, I don't really write on my iPad all that often. But if you are someone that uses that, so I'm thinking the artist or creator that's using that, none of that stuff works with the previous generations, and so you have to update everything. And I've seen some analysis articles suggesting that if you want the base level prosumer models, we're talking about the iPad Air 13, I'm sorry, the iPad Pro 13, a new keyboard, new Apple Pencil, you're talking about $1,700, which is twice the price of the entry level MacBook Air. And it's ridiculous to do that, especially since that I know some people pull this off. I can't imagine moving to the iPad as my only machine. It's just not there yet, even though there's a lot you can do with it. And Wes, you famously advocated in the past for iPads as creation devices, right? They're not just for consumption.
Absolutely.
They can be in our wonderful creation devices, but it's just not there yet. So your thoughts on the newly released hardware?
Our school is iPad 1-to-1, so I have lots of thoughts around that. But as far as the article from Engadget, it notes that this iPad Pro is skinnier, thinner than the iPod Nano, and so that is really, really something. And then related to that, there's a lot of articles on this. This one is from Dateline.com, which I assure you I'm reading every day. It's a headline: Apple's crushing iPad ad trashed by Hugh Grant and a bunch of other people. And it's got a lot of tweets that folks had sent. And I have watched the ad. The program this time is only, I think, 37 minutes. So this is a lot shorter than the standard Apple production. And I usually before the show, I'll at least try to watch the introduction, but I watched the ad, and the ad has all these creative artistic tools and technology tools, and a piano and paint and arcade and all this stuff. And it all gets completely crushed. And then it raises up. And then what's left is the thin iPad Pro. But I think that this idea of creativity being crushed and everything that's happening with AI, it does seem like that was a tone-deaf advertisement. So where we're normally extolling Apple and wow, look how amazing they are with video, it seems like in terms of the creative community, it's a little tone deaf. And there's a tweet at the end where someone just reversed it, and they're like, "Hey, Tim Cook, I corrected your ad," and it's the restoration of all those things. So I don't know, that strikes me as odd. I'm excited about in terms of features. I think the pinch feature on the new pen. I don't have any kind of timeline for getting a new iPad. And I will also say it's a real bummer, both personally and then at school professionally, to be caught between these standards, because we have a lot of our students now that have gone to the USB-C iPad, and that's great for them. But just today, I had someone who didn't have a working stylus, and I have my old Apple Pencil, which I'm happy to loan, but they don't have a lightning connector. So, it's a no-go. So anyway, that's just sort of whining. That's the way it's been for a long time. But it really dramatizes, I think, what a contrast there is between Google and the Chromebook price point and, what Apple is facing. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't do this research because I thought about doing it in Oklahoma and, just taking a look like at a state level for everyone who's one-to-one, how many folks are using Chromebooks, how many folks are using Apple laptops, how many are Windows laptops, and how many are iPad. And my perception is that number of schools that are using the iPad 100%, and we use it through 12th grade. We don't have laptops checked out to students. They can go into a lab and we have some carts, but anyway, I think that number is small. But it's exciting to see the capabilities. It doesn't to me seem like it has the market impact that Apple did years ago. And frankly, that's not Apple's target. They're looking at the consumer and the professional market. So it's just not education anymore, the way that it perhaps arguably was at one point.
Well, and I have to say too that I still think the tablet struggles with market, right? Like the people that I know that use tablets aren't using them exclusively. It's people like you and me that are going to keep your other two devices humming and rolling, right? One of the reasons why I travel with an iPad, especially when I'm working, is because it's a wonderful second monitor for my laptop. And Apple now allows you very seamlessly to just project to that other screen, and so it's an instant a second monitor. You can even buy. I mean, I've done this a couple of times until I was able to afford to update to newer models. But you could buy used iPads for a song. And that are 3 or 4 generations back, and they still have all those features that allow you to use it as a second monitor. They even dropped the iPad 10, so that's the very base model. I think it's now $350, which means when it goes on sale, it'll be under $300 at places like Target, Best Buy, maybe Amazon and Walmart. But if you're looking for a bare minimum like Apple setup, you could buy the MacBook Air M1 for $700 at Walmart. You can buy the iPad 10 for $350. That's the retail price. I imagine that would get lower on a sale. You can add to that the iPhone SE, which apparently there's going to be a new kind of SE later this year, is the rumors I've seen from folks across Apple rumor land, probably for under $400. And so for brand new stuff that all would be good enough for even a power user, you're talking about $1,400 all in to have a complete Apple piece. Wait for a sale or get a used Apple Watch, and now you have everything. And I think that would be a killer piece. Or I mentioned Luke Miani, YouTube channel before here on the podcast, but he's kind of famous. One of the things he's famous for is taking older Apple hardware and buying it and refurbishing it and make it relevant for the modern user. You could go even less and have a very functional Apple set. So, seeing prices in the $1,700-$1,800 for new stuff, I don't know. I used to be the guy that always bought the Max everything, right? And the computers have changed for sure, right? Like part of it is that they, it's hard to, you can easily run Windows speedily on 5-year-old hardware. You can easily run Mac OS on 5-year-old hardware and have a great experience, right? And before, that just wouldn't have been the case. Updating every 2 to 3 years as a power user was a common strategy. And yeah, so a lot of rambling there, but an interesting piece of information there for sure. And then, if you don't mind, Wes, I have one other article I want to focus on. This is from John Gruber, who is kind of a common Mac commentator that also is kind of in the speculation business. But he writes about a Washington Post article that was recently released that talks about Apple being behind in AI, and then talking about, and I think we may have mentioned this in the podcast, that Apple has killed their self-driving car and autoplays inside. Although I have read other media in the last week to suggest that they're thinking about maybe partnering with an electric car maker to try to stay in that business. But this was a super interesting article because it basically talked about how this respected media outlet was very much kind of we would call it power tagging in debate, but overextending what the evidence says about Apple being behind in AI. And the bottom line is that it says that AI, or that Apple isn't behind in AI. Apple just hasn't said anything really about AI. And one of the subtext, and I don't know if they picked this up from the announcement or not, because I haven't watched the announcement yet, but was that this M4 chip seems extremely capable in doing on-device AI generation. And if that's important to you, who knows where the software might go later this year. And one of the things that we just don't talk about as much anymore because it's so commonplace with Apple stuff is that the chip sitting in the current iPhone 15 is a desktop level chip, right? You could use it to easily run a desktop computer. The Mac Air M1, the one that's got an M1 chip in it, is the same chip sitting in the laptop I'm using right now. Its capability isn't hardware limited, it's software limited. That's it, right? It's just whatever you want to develop around that software. So I don't think of AI, of Apple being behind in AI. In fact, if anything, I keep thinking to myself, I can't wait until we get some evidence of where they're going, because from my vantage point, what is likely to happen is that they're going to do something that is pretty interesting and polished, as opposed to this fast release strategy that seems to be dominating the rest of the AI space.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just go ahead and predict that I think Apple's main AI play is going, and you're saying it, so this is no secret, is going to be onboard local processing of the queries to the AI, and for that reason, they're going to be touting privacy, where you're not going to be uploading data to the cloud. They also, of course, have access to, for many of us, our photos, which is huge, and I wish there was a way to change Apple Memories on the Apple TV. If there's a way, somebody let me know, because I don't think there's any way you can do that. It's actually been stuck on the memorial service for my mother, and while I do enjoy watching that, I'm like, come on, give me something else. But that's what I think they're going to do. They're going to really differentiate themselves. There are so many, lawsuits out there and controversies, and like I said, I agree, it seemed tone deaf that they were, having this iPad ad that appeared to be crushing all historical tools of creativity. And yes, they're trying to say you can do everything on the iPad, but I don't think that ad said that very well. But the time to watch is going to be in about a month, when the Worldwide Developers Conference is happening in June. I'm happy for them to not try to squeeze everything into a single monster event. I mean, they've got such a wide portfolio of devices. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm super excited to see the next generation of AI, which I think is going to really be smart assistant and just AI assistant. And we're seeing Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, talk about this with ChatGPT 5. I'll mention Gemini Advanced here in a minute. And, I think that Claude and some other tools are, if not comparable, even maybe better in some ways than what we're seeing with ChatGPT 4 now. And so we're going to, see the leapfrogs forward and back. But there's all kinds of rumors. And is Apple going to, partner with OpenAI or one of these other platforms? I don't know, but I certainly expect them to have a major play this summer in June. And I would almost be 99.9% positive to the point of betting, which I'm not going to bet, but it is going to be a privacy play on local.
Yeah. And I have to say, one of the reasons why I continue to really like being in the Apple ecosystem is I do feel like that they are very transparent with privacy plays, and I think that's pretty darn important.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we have covered 3 articles in a third of the show, but that's all right. Whenever we have an Apple event, Jason and I
Apple
are
fanboy. Here we go.
unabashed fanboys. So let's see. Let me get to this one, because this one just blew my mind, and it actually inspired me to create one of my Geeks of the Week. And I just cannot recommend this enough. This is one of the best articles I have read in years. And I put it under the heading of media literacy. It's called The New Propaganda War by The Atlantic, and it's from their forthcoming June 2024 issue. It's by Anne Applebaum. And I heard an interview with Anne recently on either Ezra Klein or The Daily. I think it was Ezra Klein. She is an incredibly prescient and insightful and smart and well-researched commentator and journalist on international affairs, and also in this case technology. And so what this article defines so well, and preview, I think the article is like printed, it would be like 23 pages or something, and you can listen to it. It's 57 minutes if you want to listen to it. Basically, when you take a look at what the enemies of the United States, China, Russia, Iran, and others are doing in the way of propaganda, and what they want to present as far as a narrative about the United States, about our leaders, that is now a more orchestrated information war, what some writers have called a like war. And it is persistent, it is organized, and it also aligns with what we see some very extreme, the most extreme elements of the Republican Party in the United States also arguing for, in terms of a very positive pro-Russia message, and things like, our election system is terrible, our justice system is terrible, news, you can't believe anything you read, throw up your hands, it's hopeless. And so I think this narrative is extremely important. Now, I'll talk in my Geek of the Week about something I created with this. I'm not sharing this with my middle school students. I'm still, of course, trying to be very sensitive to the fact that I think we need to articulate a very clear case for media literacy, and we need to be careful about the polarizing themes that could, at worst, get us fired, and if not get us fired, just really, upset some parents and create an incident where somebody is angry at things that we're talking about with students in the classroom. And so it is something to be wary and careful of. But this is thorough. This is well researched. There are so many different organizations. And the last thing I'll say about it is, we need to help students today absolutely analyze the sources. I was largely ignorant for a lot of my life, even though I did, debate. We were into sources, but I couldn't have had things roll off my tongue in terms of, oh yeah, well, Russia Today, that's a Russian government, state-sponsored, entity. And, what is the origin of these different things? Who owns these companies? And especially, which ones are being operated by foreign governments and foreign entities. This is just really, really important. So I can't say enough positive about this article. It fits in a lot of categories because some of the things that we see with cyber attack, with, targeted attacks that not only are taking folks' money, but are also, politically motivated and things like that. There's a lot of it wrapped in this cyber war, but it's this information war. And I don't think, Jason, that you and I are going to outlive this. I think this is going to be a persistent part of our lives, and it's going to be something we need to educate all citizens about, and find delicate ways, but also, I think it's important to support representative democracy and human rights. And I don't think we should fear doing that in school. So, hugely beneficial article. Are you familiar with Anne Applebaum? Had you heard her before, or read her before?
Yeah, I have. And I agree the about the notions of extremely well researched and pretty hard to argue against, actually. But the thing I would say is that even the concept of civics has become polarizing as it relates to K-12. And I'm a civics teacher, right? Like, I taught government. It was my main endorsement area. And although I didn't teach as much civics and government then I taught history classes. That doesn't mean that that's not my first love. And in fact, there's a lieutenant governor candidate in Montana who was one of my government students. So that's, if he gets elected, that's going to be pretty wild. But the thing that I'm still trying to wrap my brain around all this is like, so my feelings of discouragement are, I mean, if you're buying into this 100%, and I think this seems pretty logical about the narrative here, but my feelings of discouragement are the desired result of the bad actors here, right? And that's where I mean, it's hard to know if my emotions here are being tweaked by propaganda, right? Like, and I am very discouraged about where we're at right now, even though I mean, I will say that something that I'm surprised about in my current job is that I do have to engage with people across a wide variety of political views, and because of that, I don't speak as publicly as much as I do anymore about political issues for exactly that reason. That I want to keep my coalition of people that advocate for the things that I want and I advocate for in education to stay together, because I think it's the right thing to do for kids. But the bottom line is that it's hard to ignore the hand wringing that's going on, and obviously I'm of one political persuasion over another, but I feel like that everyone I know, no matter where their political allegiance are, if they're engaged at all, they're very worried about the future, and that's a lousy way to run a representative democracy. And and especially since that in the last 6 months, there's even been some articles in the media suggesting that some people are even advocating for more authoritarian government, right? Less democracy, less less choice, less voice. And rhetorically, who knows where people are at with X, Y, and Z. But I will tell you that I am absolutely a fan of democracy, right? Like, I think it's the worst form of government except for all the rest, is what Churchill said. And he's right about that. Like, it's fraught with peril, because when you ask people what they think, they'll tell you. And that's the most mixed blessing ever. But the bottom line is that I'd rather live in a democracy than even a very well-meaning authoritarian government. And so, yeah, and I will say, Wes, this is something I've always very much admired about you. It's true of a lot of the social studies teachers I know right now, but there's never been a more important time to double down on media literacy, because the atmosphere out there is just so toxic for truth.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, hello to Peggy George. Peggy is with us live in the chat room saying hi. That is awesome. We've got 2 folks in the chat room, so if you are able to say hi, let us know who you are and where you're coming to us from. We could talk a lot more about that, because actually I taught a what was it, a 6-part adult media literacy course called Teaching the Conspiracies in February and March, and I think this summer I'm going to be turning that into like a 7 or 8 part, and I'm going to be writing a book that is going to be a course that I want to teach, a 15-week course on this. It's just, there's so much that is so important, and yeah, we gotta be talking about that. Let's do a couple security articles. You'll get a little theme here for some of my links, because I have more podcasts, but I have just listened to some fantastic podcasts lately that have been recommended by other shows. This is the Technically Optimistic podcast. It's coming from April 24th, and the title is How Your Behavior Became the World's Biggest Resource. One of the things I'm going to try and do this next year is really make a case for my middle school students about why privacy is important. And we need to have a good understanding of data, the attention economy, and just how, going to the grocery store and giving your parents, in the case of middle schoolers, giving their phone number or whatever, all of this is a transaction. There's money involved. And there's also costs involved in terms of what happens with that. So that is one of the best podcasts that I've found, talking specifically about the importance of privacy, the whole data economy, and is just absolutely fantastic. And here's a reason, Jason, to be optimistic in one, at least small, but I don't think it's that small. The fact that either of us can say, hey, have you listened to this podcast? Have you listened to this show? Go to our podcast app, and there it is. And this is like old school RSS. It's not I mean, if you're on Spotify or something, or YouTube, it is. But if you're on Pocket Cast or something that's a straight subscription, you can straight up see what the most recent things are. And, you can go to that creator directly and then just, spend 30 minutes or an hour with them talking in your ear and really get some wonderful ideas. So anyway, any thoughts about privacy? Have you heard of Technically Optimistic? Is that a new one to you?
Subscribed on my podcast app because that sounds like something I'd like to listen to. I would just also agree. I mean, I don't have as much time as I did, let's say 5-6 years ago to listen to podcasts, although I am kind of doubling down. I turned 50 in October, and I'm noticing that my body is acting like it's 50 now. And so I need to kind of triple down on the daily walks in the morning, noon, and night. And podcasting is a wonderful companion for such activities. But I mean, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because like we've talked about in the past, I don't know two bigger advocates for new media than Dr. Fryer and myself. But the bottom line is that it provides an extraordinary opportunity to listen to people that can challenge your brain, and that's unbelievably good. But at the same time, this is. You want to talk about niche, right? Like that's what's great about this environment. It's a double-edged sword because niche goes in the other direction too. But very exciting stuff.
And here's a connection to the classroom. We need to be talking with our students, and I do this a little at the beginning of the year, but I need to do it more. Who are they listening to? Who are their influencers? Influencers and folks who are not, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, CBS, ABC, all of this, mainstream, what we would call media, but they're just folks who are out there creating content, sharing content, and influencing folks. I think I'll do the Mitt Romney article here in a second related to TikTok about this, because it's an interesting theory. But this is not a theory that influencers are a big deal. And I think that we really need to address this. And if you want to be really radical, how are we going to empower influencers in our schools and in our communities to be able to share local news, and also to share good news and messages of kindness, and basically share things that are not vitriolic and polarizing and all the bad things that we hear about social media. So I think there's a lot there. We won't do them all. There's a few more privacy security articles, but we got to do this one because I can't say you heard it first, folks, but you've heard this multiple times. This is AP News on May the 1st. Change Healthcare cyber attack, which there's another article saying half of U.S. citizens have had their data compromised in this hack. This is a huge cyber attack. The headline is from AP: Change Healthcare cyber attack was due to a lack of multi-factor authentication, United Healthcare CEO says. So we have beat that horse time and time again, and it really astounds me that there is a healthcare provider at this point that is not requiring multi-factor authentication. I just take it for granted that all my accounts now have them. And if you, ladies and gentlemen, listeners of the world, are not using a password manager, so you have a unique and separate long password, complex password on every account, and you're not turning on multi-factor authentication, that is a change that you need to make. And I know that at different times, Dr. Neiffer and I we had to make that shift because we had accounts that were using an old password, and we also just needed to turn on this thing called multi-factor. And so that to me was a reminder that message about password security and multi-factor is not something we should take for granted that everyone is doing and everyone knows. And we need to pay attention if the bank and the health, care chart, the thing is, this was an intermediary. So the dentist's office or whatever medical offices were interacting in a lot of times with this huge company. But anyway, it's just a reminder of those security things.
Yeah. And I will say, very interestingly, one of the reasons why I feel very fortunate that I'm on T-Mobile is that I get 5 gigs of coverage while I'm in Japan. And the second I appear with my devices in another country after 10 hours before being in, across the ocean, all the security alarms go off, right? Like, what's going on? Who's this guy doing? Where, and how? And it's because I have all these security pieces set up, and I'm very thankful for that. It's a bit inconvenient when I travel because I end up having to sign in or prove I am who I am. But that also means if someone else is trying to do naughty things with my information, then it's no big deal because the security has my back.
I'll do the Mitt Romney one really fast. We don't talk tons of politics here, but oh gosh, it is an election season, folks, and there are all kinds of ways that technology and technology policy crosses into our conversations. This was from New Republic, and it was Mitt Romney reveals the twisted reason why Congress moved to ban TikTok. It's not about national security. And what Romney apparently said at a private donor dinner was that many in Congress have been upset at the perception that TikTok was swaying many young voters towards the Palestinian cause and against Israel, and that was an explicit reason why they favored the ban of TikTok, not something that was going to be more broadly addressing social media platforms writ large. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And I don't know if that's true or not. I'm just spreading a rumor from the New Republic, but I also have read that other places, and I think that the frustration that older adults have over social media generally and young people's, and it's all of our addiction. It's not just young people's addiction, but over smartphones, the roles that they play in our lives and the influence that they cast in our lives. That's a real thing. So anyway,
yeah, absolutely.
That could be true, but plausible.
Well, right. And just to let you know, our new subtitle of the podcast is "Spreading the Rumors from the New Republic." So
maybe we could do that. That'll be our show title. Okay. Well, we've done 2/3 of the show. We better do it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to start off with a really great article that appeared in Higher Education Digest. And the author or the co-author of the article is a gentleman by the name of Stephan Bouchard, who is a longtime, he's a debate guy. He was a high octane competitor in high school and college, and he's a high octane coach. He's coached college and high school. He ran planned debate for a number of years and is a handbook author, and is really been at the center of the space, and someone who I very like seventh degree way know, but more importantly, very much respect what he does because he's a good advocate. And he's been really pushing hard on this AI stuff, in part because he sees that it's going to be really disruptive. But he released an article along with Anand Rayo, who is his partner right now. They do consulting and advocacy work in AI, and they talked about something that I think is really important, which is that the concept of debate is going to be massively important from a skill development standpoint to live in a world of generative AI. And I think Wes and I have talked about this in the past. We both have debate backgrounds. I did 4 years of debate in high school, 4 years in college. I was decent at it. I coached debate for a number of years, have a lot of success there. I ran a debate handbook company with a good pal of mine from college, and just recently retired from that. So I've been part of debate in some way, shape, or form for 30 years. And so I know what he's talking about here, but the skill sets that debate help teach, and competitive debate is obviously a part of this, but a lot of what is great about debate can be integrated into a classroom very easily, no matter what topic you're teaching, is going to be the kind of skills that are really going to be required in a world where so much information is manufactured as opposed to exposed. The logical reasoning, argumentation, teamwork, digital fluency that is taught by debate skills is really important. And so I would say right now, if you are a teacher in the K-12 environment, even if you're teaching littles, that you should be thinking about, are there ways I can start integrating discussion and critical analysis and taking opposing views and looking at them in that context can be a part about the way that you teach, because the bottom line is that that's where we're at right now, in that we need something beyond the traditional learning methods to be able to do that. Now, not that this it differs from the authors of the article. I still think there's a lot of utility in understanding what you're talking about. And in fact, debate, one of the things that coaching debate taught me is that students that understand the issues they're talking about are always going to be better than those that are just, handed something and trying to argue without a firm understanding of the concepts that they're discussing. But there's never been a more important time to think about this. And if you don't have a competitive debate team at your school, I think it's time to start one. If you have one, I think it's time to increase the funding for it. And I think we should be thinking about more opportunities to give to students. We built this incredible infrastructure during COVID to have debates online. Most of that has gone away, but it could be a really amazing way to have a year-long debate circuit, including with adults too. I know there were some attempts at professional debate leagues in the 80s and 90s. Heck, I would join Dr. Fryer for a Fryer and Neiffer debate reunion in a professional league or two, right? But I think the bottom line is that this is a way for us to help our students grow in the information skills they need.
Amen. So much to say about this. Number one, if you don't follow Jason on LinkedIn, just do that immediately, because that's where I saw this article and that's how I read it a couple days ago when he shared it. It is fantastic. Debate, cross-examination, having all the evidence, having all the information, but needing to digest it, understand it, articulate a response to it, stand up to a cross-examination and questioning about it. I mean, all of that is so good. I'm going to drop a link into the chat to the American Lyceum and a shout out to Tim Kaine. Tim was the reason I joined the debate team at the Air Force Academy and was there for 4 years. He was 2 years ahead of me, but in the last couple of years, he has started this. He's a co-founder of this, and it is about adult debate, but it's about dialogue and listening and a way to address polarization and the ways in which we need to attempt to intelligently engage in conversations around topics, not just shouting matches and, short 240 character diatribes or whatever you want to call it. So fantastic article. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I may talk later about some of the ways that I kind of brought that into our thing about our Fruit Loop conspiracy theories, talking about the moon landings, because the presentations we had and the interaction that we had after that had an authenticity to it. I guess that's the last point. How are you going to authentically assess student learning and student skills? That is an essential question that no one has a perfect answer to, but integrating debate and the elements of debate that are in this article into our classroom and into our assessments is a winning strategy.
Yep, absolutely. And then I just thought this was really interesting, Wes, and you would find it interesting as well. Stefan released an article literally a few hours ago on his Substack that was super interesting. But for those of you that have not utilized or have not participated at all, either as a participant, audience member, a judge in a competitive debate works by taking direct quotations from research, providing and using it to provide an argument, going back and forth. It's not just shouting things at each other, although that can be a fun part of it. It is about presenting evidence to make your point. And Stefan, who is again still very much involved in debate, has discovered in the last 24 hours, as he was making a topic briefing, that AI is now capable of pulling direct quotations from the research that it reads to work with you. That would be something that in a debate world would be very useful. And as it turns out, that's an incredible piece. It not only means that research will be a lot easier for those engaging in competitive debate, but that it's something that it tells you that these tools are just that much more functional than they were just months ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. I want to mention something about Gemini. So here's another podcast reference. I don't listen to it every week, but This Week in Tech is a fantastic podcast. It's long. They record it live on Sundays, but oh my gosh, they had absolutely one of my favorite authors in the world And I just loved so many things that they talked about, especially the tech tools that they are using, from search to browsers to AI. And so it's This Week in Tech, episode 977 from April 28th. It was called Gahoo Yugle. But Leo Laporte, who's always the host, had special guests Amy Webb and Kevin Rose. And Kevin, had tech, what is it? Oh gosh, I'm going to blunder. Super big, and early Web 2.0 guy with just Google Kevin Rose, Kevin or Jason, and you can help me with his,
Dig is his
Dig, Dig Nation. Yeah, how could I forget? It's because I'm 53. So anyway, Amy Webb has written fantastic books, and if you take anything from this episode at all, just go to Amazon, or if you want to go to your local bookstore, whatever, search Amy Webb and then read one of her books. But she does a South by Southwest presentation about the tech trends, and I need to watch that. It's a really big thing that happens each year. And one of the things they talked about was the AI tools that they used, and both Kevin and Amy said, and they were telling Leo, oh, you've got to be using Gemini Advanced, because when Gemini, which was barred by Google, came out, it sucked. It wasn't very good, and it got a bad name. And so they changed the name. And I do pay Google monthly for a family plan. I don't remember it's a Google One something. But I just signed up after hearing this, and I get 2 months free. This is not a sponsored advertisement. Anyway, I'm trying it out for free, but I have been just dabbling with it. But the fact, as we've mentioned on the show before, that those of us invested in Gmail, in Google Calendar, in the Google Drive ecosystem, there's so much there that AI can connect with. And so the fact that Gemini Advanced, which you do have to pay for, is really, really powerful and good, is now one of the things that I am working on in terms of AI, and the little experiment that I'll share in my Geek of the Week relates to that. So are you, Jason, a Gemini Advanced user yet?
I am. And as a matter of fact, it's kind of a long story, but I was just given 6 months of Gemini credit because of some phone exchange purchases that I did for my family. But the other thing that also note is that when Gemini 1.5 comes out, I would assuming is relatively soon, it has a massive size context window. And what that means is that you can give it more information to utilize. And so the Google AI Lab right now gives you access to 1.5, and it's got a million token context window, which is approximately like 4 average size books. And I've been using it to do some, I've got some projects going on right now that are probably would sound a little out there, just playing with AI to try to figure out, what it's doing and where it's going. But I'm able to hand it a PDF of a book, and within 2 minutes be able to have a conversation about it, and then give it another book, and it just tick, 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 done.
Yeah, crazy. All right, here's a biotech AI article, and we got about 8 minutes left. If you haven't heard of AlphaFold, this is a really, really big deal. This article is from CNET today on May the 8th, and it's titled, Google's New AI Predicts Molecular Behavior, which could supercharge drug discovery. So if you listen to some different futurists, like Ray Kurzweil, they not only talk about AI and these smart large language models, they'll also talk about a brain interface like a Neuralink, which there's other companies working on it, but they'll also be talking about nanotechnology and biotechnology. And so AlphaFold had, a couple of years ago, it's responsible for part of the reason why we were able to get effective vaccines for COVID so quickly. Because if we were relying on the old ways, and I'm not going to pretend to understand all this, but to basically map proteins, it would just take years and years. And this article talks about, how many thousands of years that it would take. And so this headline, this was a paper published in the Nature Journal on Wednesday, said that this new latest version of AlphaFold 3, which predicts molecular structure, is at least 50% better than all previous models. That's a huge jump. And when we think about, and so structures of proteins, we're talking about, the ways in which DNA and RNA interact. And, I'm just going to come to the limit of my biology knowledge really quickly if I keep trying to say these acronyms, but it's a really big deal. There are lots and lots of these proteins. And as we're trying to find cures and medicines that can help people with all kinds of different medical afflictions and diseases, whether it's a genetic condition or something that's contagious, this is massive. And this is very good too. Now, it also has a Frankenstein potential, of course, so that's what happens with powerful tools. But I think this is a positive and definitely something to pay attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. And then let's see here. Let me do a quick article here, and then we can kind of mosey into our Geeks of the Week. OpenAI has started giving developers some kind of preview into its train instructions. And the reason why this concept is super interesting to me, and this is from TechCrunch today or yesterday, if you happen to be in Japan. Basically they talk about how through some developer previews and conversations they've been having, they're giving some sense of what it's doing in order to create guardrails inside of AI. And why that's interesting, of course, is that we've seen several articles the last couple of months about weird stuff that happens with AI. And a good example of that is the thing we featured a couple of weeks ago with the images that Google was generating that were just flatly weird, looking to create historical images that featured things that just wouldn't be the case. So it would insert something, I'm assuming, in the name of multiculturalism that just was bizarre and not something that would have happened in reality. But there's a lot of kind of interesting pieces here. But the bottom line is that they are building rules that try to balance things like privacy concerns, not giving contact info for people. Where to draw that line is interesting between someone public and private. How to avoid hallucinations, but also don't create rules that can be easily manipulated, which we've talked several times before about how it's pretty easy to manipulate a lot of the internal rules. And in fact, there's some people that spend a good part of their time either intentionally or unintentionally red teaming these tools, trying to get it to do things that are weird or unusual or get to ignore its rules. The famous situation in 2023 when Kevin Roos from the New York Times was able to get Sydney, the early beta of Copilot, to hit on him and then suggest he leaves his wife for an AI. That was all part of this, and then rules they put into place. But just a reminder that AI tools are pretty strange, and the rules that we set up in our heads and in our systems, and certainly in education about the internet, don't apply to these new models. And that's something we need to be extremely cognizant about.
And I'll say that we need to be careful about the AI tools that we give students access to at school, just as we would for other kinds of filtering things. Now, we need to recognize that many students, certainly when they get into high school, and a lot of middle schoolers too, have a phone that may or may not have any kind of filtering on it at all. But there is a wide range of available possibilities with these AI tools today, because of exactly what you're saying, the guardrails. So I think this is a really interesting and important conversation. Sometimes in AI, this is called alignment. And the question is, whose values and which values are you trying to align the AI to? And I will also predict that what's going to become both creepy and troublesome in the years ahead is that as we strive for alignment and we have emergent behaviors, it is extremely likely that AIs are going to not do as well staying inside guardrails. And I'm not just talking about AGI and the Terminator, but it's, we see it right now with these models. And so it's an open question. People don't know the answer to it, but based upon what we've seen right now, this is going to be a continuing challenge. And it's not just because it's a technical challenge, it's a challenge of values, because we have folks with a lot of different values and ideas about things like, free speech and expression and censorship and all these kinds of things. So good article.
Well, Dr. Fryer, I see we're near the top of the hour here. Can you please share your Geeks of the Week?
Okay, well, I have to overshare a little bit. First one, Google has a free 2-hour webinar series, I guess, that is called Grow with Google. And so I had not heard of this. It's just grow.google, and you can get to it. And it's called Generative AI for Teachers. So I'm guessing that it's probably basic stuff, but who knows? There's always things to learn. It's free and it's from Google. So I'm going to take advantage of that. Second one is my little webinar test of, hey, I'll do some free webinars and then see if anybody will pay. The paying part of that is over. So I just decided to make all my webinars free. I just did about 3 or 4 of them. But I think I don't have these up yet, but I think I'm going to be doing regular, both face-to-face and then online AI play dates, in part just because I need to do that. And so that webinars.wesfryer.com is where I'll do that. And then finally, this is a video. So it is called Democracy and Human Rights Need Your Voice. And this is a 2.5-minute half Ignite style presentation. But the backstory is that I was so moved by the new propaganda or article that I mentioned from the Atlantic, that I had to take it, throw it into both ChatGPT, and then see if I could get images. It refused. I asked it to give me 10 slides, make this at an 8th grade reading level. I'm not sharing this with my kids, but if I was going to, and 30 to 40 words per slide, it did a beautiful job summarizing it, but then it wouldn't produce the images because it's polarizing. So I went to Ideogram and I created a slideshow, and that 2.5-minute video is the recorded slideshow. But I also used not Bard, Gemini Advanced. And I was really, really impressed with the quality. So I actually created 2 versions of this. And I think that the link I gave you is actually the Gemini Advanced version. It is fascinating to see how these models are summarizing and, trying to put things at a different developmental level. So when you've just, read a what would take you 57 minutes to listen to, 20-something page article, and then you're seeing, oh gosh, look at the way they explain that for 8th graders, and look at what they did. I tweaked it. I used it as a draft, but it was a really fun AI experiment, and you can get some links and details in the description of that. But I was like totally stoked to have this AI experiment, and I encourage everybody to play with Gemini Advanced and Ideogram, because it is amazing.
Yeah, and by the way, have we talked about the new feature in Ideogram where it can describe, or you can use it to describe describe an image you upload?
I think so. And then I was playing today with the magic prompt where it'll take whatever you've done and it'll improve it, and then you can further iterate on that. And yeah, and then you can upload to it with Gemini Advanced, and with you can't upload a file. You just have to, drop links and things. But man, I tell you, it's
yeah, exactly. And I've created some wild stuff. Like I've uploaded like the box of a 1950s chemistry set, like the one you'd give to a kid. And that's when, we used to do things like put nuclear materials in chemistry sets. Right now with atomic energy, before we knew a little better that was a bad idea. But I would upload that, and then it would create a description of that, and I think that's only an Ideogram Pro. So I don't know if you're a Pro user or not, Wes, but Ideogram Pro allows you to upload, and then it creates a detailed description of that image. Then you just delete the original image, and then it recreates it, and then you could just start playing around with it to get whatever you want. And I created some, really weirdo, funny, interesting images doing that. Ideogram is outstanding. And I hate to think how much time I would waste doing that if I were still in a teaching role. So,
Well, and I'm not trying to create polarizing content to do something malicious as a bad actor,
no,
but again, because of the guardrails, you're going to get an absolute no from some tools, and then others are going to have unbelievable creativity that just blows you away, and that's thanks to you, Dr. Neiffer. I knew about ideogram, and I'm so happy I do. So.
and it also feels like that particular tool just doesn't get as much attention as the other image pieces, and I think it's the best in class right now, in my humble opinion. But okay, enough for me, at least on that topic. Two things I wanted to mention. First of all, I did use generative AI in part to do some of my travel planning for Japan. And while this has always been a bucket list trip for me, I never really knew enough about individual cities or what I wanted to see here. And my wife had a little more of an idea than I did, and she read through. We typically go through the Lonely Planet for every place we visit first to kind of create itineraries. But one of the things that I did for Kyoto, we're here for 3 days. Not a ton of time. It's a big city, lots of interesting things going on here. But in Kyoto, I just went to ChatGPT and said, "Hey, I'm in Kyoto for 3 days. I'm interested in this list of things." And it was, I'm a nerd, and I'm into video games, and I'm into trains, and I'm into history, and I'm into modern art. Like, can you come up, with a list of 10 to 15 things you think I would really enjoy? And tomorrow is the day we're going to do mostly things on my list. And there's a street, there's one in Tokyo as well, that's just dominated by tech businesses and markets that have, vintage and new technology, which is great. And also recommend 2 museums that I had never heard of before, that we're going to go visit, including the Train Museum, which is super exciting. But that's a really great use for those technology pieces. But also, I am on vacation. I'm trying not to do much work here, although work tends to sneak into my daily routine anyways. But I just watched Fallout, a series on Amazon Prime. It's based off the video game Fallout, and it's not a series I would show to kids. It's pretty darn violent because it's based on a violent video game, but the narrative storytelling and kind of the vintage modern tech design of the series is stunning. And so if you are a nerd and kind of like that futuristic apocalyptic sci-fi stuff, it is amazing. And I watched all 8 episodes the last week, and I think I'm going to watch it again. Actually, I enjoyed it so much. So that's a Fallout on Amazon.
Fantastic.
Okay, Dr. Fryer, where can people find you on the interwebs?
Well, assuming my website is not down, which I've been having some difficulty with some malware, whatever. My website's wesfryer.com, and usually it's up and working. And I checked yours tonight, Dr. Neiffer. Yours is, so your web host is doing better than mine, I guess.
That's funny how that works, right? And I am on aicentrist.com, but this here is the EdTech Situation Room. We're a mostly week-to-week podcast that appears on Wednesday nights, sometime in the middle of the morning in East Asian time zones, middle of the night UTC. It's usually 7 p.m. Mountain Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Daylight Time, depending on the season. And of course, we'd love it if you could join us live. Thanks to Becky George for being in our chat room tonight. But if you can't hear us live, you can go to YouTube or Facebook, where all of our archives are there. You can go where your finer podcasts are aggregated on your favorite podcast app. We hope you stay safe and stay savvy, and we'll see you next time on the EdTech Situation Room.
But not next week.
But not next week. Arigato, Dr. Fryer.
That's all.